Right now, we're going to talk more about what's going on with the pandemic and specifically where we are in vaccinations for the youngest people who have not had protection up until now. Moderna saying in the last couple of days it is going to be filing an emergency use authorization for children, the youngest children who have not gotten access to the vaccine as of yet. The CEO of Moderna is with us now. That is Stéphane Bancel. Our Anjali Kamlani is joining us as well. Stéphane, thank you for being with us. Appreciate your time. And as I said, parents of young children have been anxiously awaiting this news. What can you tell me about the timeline, potential timeline for the filing and ideally, I guess, for the approval?
Yes, good morning and thank you for the invitation. So we're talking, still a couple of months to the availability of the vaccine. This is not a couple of weeks. I just want to be realistic for the parents that are waiting and have been waiting for a long time. We need to file all the data to the FDA. They need to review the data. Most probably, they're going to want to have an independent advisory board to review the data and provide feedback. And so we're talking a couple of months, but that should come pretty soon.
Stéphane, Anjali here. I wonder, does that fall in line with what you're expecting now, the pace that the FDA and other regulatory bodies are taking? Does it seem to be a little bit slower and a little bit more deliberate compared to the first round?
Not necessarily. I mean, if you remember, we announced the Moderna phase 3 data in the adults. That was in November of 2020 now. And it took, a good month to get authorization. And that's the type of things we should, I think, expect to see. Again, with the young children, you want to make sure that the data is reviewed thoroughly. From what I've seen so far, and it looks really good, but they're going to want to go spend some detail and make sure that everything is correct.
I also wonder on the rollout for that, are we expecting that this might come in before the end of the school year, or does it look like more into summer when you're expecting some response?
Yeah, so, we are mid-March, so a couple of months. It's highly possible it's in the spring. I've heard a lot from parents who are really eager to vaccinate their kids as soon as possible. As you know, there's a new wave in Europe with the BA2 that is starting to pop up, and you've seen the ratio of that virus in the US. So I can see some families wanting to do it before the school year. The other ones, of course, can do it in the summer to be ready for next time we go back indoor in the fall.
Stéphane, talk to us about the latest thinking on boosters here, and not just a booster as well, but potential shots to address Omicron variants, et cetera. Where does Moderna stand in all of that process?
Yes, so in terms of the Omicron-specific shot, which we are looking as a pretty unique and novel, innovative way to do it, which will be 2 mRNA molecules in each vial, one containing the existing vaccine on the market that has been approved, and one being in a 100% copy of the Omicron virus. And the idea by putting both of them in the vaccine at the same total mass, so it will be half the mass for each component, is that it will provide us the ability to be ready in the fall, because what nobody can tell is in the fall, are we going to see a genetic daughter of Omicron as a new variant or a new one coming from left field? If we remember, Delta was not a genetic daughter of Alpha. Omicron was not a genetic daughter of Delta. And so nobody really knows what's coming next. And we need to be ready for it. And I think with this special approach that Moderna can do, that other technology cannot do as fast, we will be ready to provide protections to people who want it as come early fall.
Stéphane, is the pandemic over this year? And what does over look like for people?
So, again, I want to speak with a lot of caution and humility because the virus has surprised us many times and I've never managed a pandemic before. We believe that there's an 80% chance that the world slowly goes back to normal for most people. I want to be very careful and respectful of people that are, for example, immunocompromised. Until the virus really stabilizes and we have already a very high efficacy, those people are extremely high risk of being hospitalized or dying. But for most healthy people, I think, except if we have a very strange variant with higher virulence back into the fall or next year or the year after, I think that's a piece we just need to be careful. I mean, the good news now is with mRNA technology, and Moderna is very committed to adapt the vaccine as needed. And we have manufacturing capacity that we didn't have back then, if you remember, because this was our first product. when the product was authorized in December 2020, we only had 20 million doses to ship for the entire planet, and they all went to the US government. Where we stand now is we have 2 to 3 billion of capacity per year. So if something were to happen, we will be in a much more normal world, a bit like you see with flu, which is if you want a vaccine, you can walk to a pharmacy, it's available. So I think for people who will be able to use testing, for example, when you go see a relative that is at high risk, you're going to want to test yourself at home. That is available now. You can vaccinate and boost yourself. Treatments are available as well. So I think if people use the tools correctly, we can go back to a more normal life.
I wanted to ask Stéphane about, as we are going back to a normal life and as the pandemic recedes in urgency, what the funding picture is going to look like. The U.S. federal government, for example, has said its funding is waning for vaccines. Is that going to be an issue, not just for global health reasons, but also for Moderna's sales reasons as we head further into this year and into next year?
Sure. So indeed, the situation in the US is quite unique. Actually, this morning we announced an increased number of advanced purchase agreements with countries around the world. At our Q4 call on February 24, and if I remember correctly, I was with you as well, the number was $19 billion of signed APAs with upfront payments. Well, this morning we're increasing this number to $21 billion of advanced purchase agreements that have been signed by countries around the world, but the US. That number includes $0 coming from the US. So what is not clear today is, will the US become a private market, which is the case for all of the medicines we have access to, or is it still going to be in the fall where the US governments buy directly vaccines and make them available for free? Clearly, that has not been decided. As you well know, the funding is not available. So what we are doing as a company is to get ready for a private market situation. And if you think about it, in the public setting, when the US government was buying, the price of a vaccine was actually very low. The price that the vaccine was sold to the US government is actually much lower than what it was sold in Europe or in Japan, because we insisted, when we supplied the vaccine contract back in the fall of 2020, to give a reimbursement to the US government for, you remember, the grant we got to fund the clinical study. And so actually, in an endemic setting, I believe Moderna's average selling price for a vaccine will be higher than what it has been over the last 2 years.
I want to talk to you about that, Stéphane, because I know also you're looking at globally, even with your pipeline and the other vaccines you're working on, you're looking at a global scale, specifically looking at setting up in Africa as well, and that helps with, the production going forward. So tell us the timeline of that right now. How quickly are you going to be able to, get products out, and how does that impact the future of your pipeline?
Sure. So now today we have 2 to 3 billion of annual dose capacity that we can make. We just announced last night, actually, a final agreement with the Australian government to build a new Moderna plant in Australia that is coming with a 10-year supply agreement of respiratory vaccine. We're trying to kind of set up a subscription or service type of model in exchange for building the plant on Australian soil. And in exchange for that plant being available, if there's a new outbreak or pandemic, God forbid, that they can use the capacity we are reserving of number of doses for whatever virus they want. And as you say, we announced recently building a plant in Africa. It will, of course, take a couple of years to build a new plant from scratch, like it will in Australia. We're also having advanced discussion with Canada to build the plant there. But what is exciting to me is the pipeline. If you think, Angelique, at our vaccine day in 2020, we had 9 vaccines in development, 0 commercial, 0 phase 3, 1 was in phase 2. If you look at where we are today for Vaccine Day 2022, we have 31 programs in development. That is from 9. We have 1 commercial product, obviously everybody knows it, 4 phase 3, when we had none, and 9 phase 2. And this happened while our team worked really hard during the pandemic. And think about the cash resources we had. The last time we disclosed financials, we had more than $17 billion of cash. So investing that cash extensively. So think about where the Moderna pipeline is going to be just in 2 years from now.
All right. Thank you so much, Stéphane. It's good to see you. Stéphane Bancel is the CEO of Moderna. Really appreciate your time here this morning.